All right, it's just after 4 o'clock, so we will call the meeting of the Community Protective Services Committee to order, and I will start by asking if there are any disclosures of conflict of interest with committee members. Seeing none. I'll move on to consent. Oh, sorry. First of all, the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. So I have had a request to pull items 2.5 and 2.6 from consent. Are there any other items to be pulled? Seeing none, I will take a motion on the balance, and of course, people are free to make comments, ask questions, as long as they're not, really long. Otherwise, we would have pulled that item. Any comments or questions on the remaining items, and a mover for the consent items minus 2.5 and 2.6? So Councillor Pelosi is moving the bulk, and Councillor Lewis is seconding that, and Councillor Pelosi, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple comments as we move through today's lengthy consent items. In regards to the White Oaks Park, I just wanted to say thank you to the community as we move this forward. It's a privately funded multi-purpose stage in White Oaks Park that's looking to move forward. The decision will go to council to receive this donation of a value of $300,000. That's all private and no money from the taxpayers coming into that, so I'm grateful for that. And a question for staff in regards to 2.11, in regards to the age-friendly London progress report. Recently at the Kiwanis Senior Center and realized all the paid parking in that parking lot, wondering if the seniors using the programming of that facility have any exemption from paying for that parking, or if they need to incur that cost as well.
Through the chair, people that are attending the Age-Friendly London meetings, the parking is bagged. So there's no cost to participate in the meetings at the facility. And those folks that are members of the Senior Center and arrive for programming, it's built into the cost of their membership.
Go ahead, Councillor Pelosi.
And just one item to staff also in regards to age-friendly. Realizing through that report, we spoke of the OASIS program that's offered to seniors. Just a thank you for helping with that partnership. I was able to be part of it and see the good work they're doing and how much the seniors appreciate it. And just want to thank staff and the community for bringing that effort into making sure everyone's included.
Okay, Councillor Lewis, and then the Mayor.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, my first question on this agenda is with regard to item 2.10, the RFP on animal services. And this was a question that was raised by a member of the public with me, and it was, I thought, a fair question that needed to be asked. In this RFP, we lumped the Caddy Shack operation, which is an adoption center, and partners with our cat rescue groups in the city, which is a bit different than animal control's duty. So when we put out the RFP, is there a reason that the Caddy Shack service was included with animal control as opposed to separate RFPs for the two operations, which are rather distinct based on not only the feedback from the public, but on my visits to these sites?
Ms. Chapman?
Through the chair. There was a reason that we proposed the bundling in the RFP. The goal of the RFP is for civic administration to secure the best service at the best value for the city. And what is bundled in this service proposal accomplished a savings of $125,000, and we anticipate a much higher prospect of increased adoptions at the Caddy Shack going forward.
Okay, I appreciate the response on that. I have another question about a different item on the agenda, and that is with regard to item 2.8 and 2.13. These two kind of go together, and so through you to our staff with regard to the East Community Center construction update and the irregular tender on the park work. I do know the answer to this, but I know that for members of the public, they're quite interested and concerned, and so I want to ask this question publicly. With regard to the irregular tender, that does not mean that we are sacrificing any of the planned amenities to the park in an effort to keep costs down or because we didn't have multiple tenders. We're still going ahead with all of the planned amenities, and with regard to the construction of the center itself, we are still, although we are a little bit behind, we are still hoping that we'll have the building construction complete before the end of the calendar year, so that in 2020, in the winter spectrum, we can start offering programs in February. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that the information on the East Community Center is correct. We have offered them in the early 2020 as far as spectrum programming and anticipate a soft opening prior to that as well. As far as the East Park site, we do plan on going forward with all the amenities. This is a process that we bring forward to council to let the council know that it was an irregular result, that we had one bidder, but it's a bidder that was part of approached the process properly, and we've accepted the bid to carry on with construction to meet the timelines that we anticipated there as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a really quick follow-up comment to that. I just want to, I know I've said it before, but I want to say it again, my sincere thanks to Mr. Stafford and all the staff involved in this process. I know that I have been a little bit of a pain in the backside, phoning you pretty much weekly for updates on where we are with this community center construction. I know the community is eagerly awaiting it to be open. I'm sure we can find some fun informal things to do with our soft opening before the more formal programs are offered in 2020. So I will continue to call you on a regular basis and keep on top of those updates, but thank you for putting up with my badgering on that and for all the work that's gone into this.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Holder.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a comment that does not involve badgering nor anything except a thoughtful comment about some great corporate citizens. And I'd like to tie in on Councillor Pelosa's comments when she talked about the pavilion donation for White Oaks Park. You know, too often we have individuals who I think are quiet heroes that go out and just do the right thing for its own sake. Here we have an example of one part of our corporate community that is standing very, very tall and have chosen to make a significant contribution, not their first ever on behalf of this community, but this is one where, as a result of the initiative taken by this particular organization, and if I may say, the hard work, and I do mean this honestly, of Councillor Pelosa, and I think doggedness and determination are two words that strike me about her approach to this in a most thoughtful way. But she's acknowledged that there is a consortium led by a company, it's York Developments. Now, we always think of developers in whatever fashions we might think of them. I think of them as builders, people that are doing some very positive things. And here's one where York Developments is leading a consortium to provide what is ultimately a $300,000 donation to provide a permanently roofed pavilion in White Oaks Park. And I saw the plans with Councillor Pelosa on Canada Day celebrations. And you know, we don't say thanks enough to people who are out there that matter and make a difference. And this is one of those who've done a great job just because it's the right thing to do. And they don't want naming rights. They don't want any of that. We'll put up a plaque, or a plaque will be put up to honor them and acknowledge them. And I think it's just to say thanks. It's the smallest thing. It's the least we can do. But you know, when organizations, when corporations, when individuals stand tall, I think we're allowed to say thank you very publicly and call them out on that. And that's one of those situations where good on them and great for the community in White Oaks. And Councillor Pelosa, I salute you and the team that was so keen and persistent and consistent in getting this done. And Mr. Stafford, you and your team that managed it at the other end. So I know there's a lot of thanks going around, but to York Developments and those folks that, that really stepped up tall. We just, I want to add my thanks to it as well.
Any other comments or questions from all of the, Councillor Van Holst, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is also for item 2.10. I just wanted some clarification. It seems in the capital B and C, we're looking for a number, they both ask for one-time funding for a mobile building. I'm wondering if we're purchasing 2 mobile buildings, or that's one.
Councillor, I'm just going to interrupt you. That's the background report. So they've included the original direction setting out to for the creation of the Cat Adoption Center. So if you'll see in the background, there's the motion from, I believe, 2011, something like that, and then today's staff recommendation.
Okay, yes, thank you, my apologies.
No problem. Any other comments or questions on the consent items? Okay, so we have a mover, we have a seconder, and we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
That brings us to item 2.5, which is an information report from Mr. Stafford about Parks winter garbage collection, and Councillor Pelosa asked me to pull that, so go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, through you to staff for your work on this and bringing it back so efficiently and laying out what we have for city amenities for parks and what we maintain in the summer versus the winter and how many cans we do it, realizing that we rely on summer staff, temporary staff, and we have 470 parks that we take care of in the summer, and then that staff goes back into the arenas to some extent during the winter months, and we drop to 143 parks that we're maintaining. With the multi-year budget coming up, I would like to move a motion that I have not drafted yet, so a heads up on that, that we actually get a list of the parks to help us see throughout the city. I know that there's a major parks listed in this, but throughout all our wards for council can see quite easily what areas of the city are being serviced and what ones aren't. So a list of parks that are currently serviced during the winter months and identifying the parks or trails that you see as being the easy wins. Reading the report that it's about $590 per snow event if we had to clear a whole park trail system and a whole parking lot to get the garbage can. That's certainly not my intention. It'd be those easy wins of the park at the end of the trail system by the road that wouldn't require any extra clearing, just park staff to pick it up, or if arena staff could just get the garbage can if it's close to the arena door, their dumpster, if that wouldn't cause any issues with those contracts for staff, of just those easy wins to allow a little bit more service with minimal increases to our budget. Looking to see your comments if you think that's in the right direction going into the multi-year budget process.
Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, I think that's a good process. We'll look at that, and we continue to look at it as requests come forward from your constituents and how that works, and some different ways to do it. And as we mentioned in the report, there's some different things like garbage can sensors, and working with our sanitation division if there's a different way and different types of garbage cans that we can use as well, and litter containers. We've moved to some smaller litter containers in areas that we find are dog walkers that aren't needing the full 45-gallon can, and so we're looking at different opportunities, and I think that's a fine request to deliver that information to you and provide some of those opportunities as well.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Okay. Any follow-up? No, he's done. Any follow-up, Councillor?
Did we need to have a conversation, or could that motion be drafted and then any other comments regarding it from Committee B?
I'm not seeing people. Oh, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. I wasn't going to comment, but now I feel I have to. I thought we had support from staff to suggest that your idea had some merit, that we're going to provide a list of some of those. You're putting an action item to a receipt, and I feel at this point, with all respect to the intention behind it, it feels a bit premature to me. I think that if the thought process is that the Director of Parks and Rec is going to provide a list of those parks where it might be easier to be able to make some accommodations, and then we can take some action as a result of receiving that report. But I think we're doing two things in the same motion, and I'm a little
Mr. Mayor.
challenged with it. So we can get there, but I'm just struggling with it.
It's not a problem to add an action to, we do it all the time.
No, don't misunderstand, Chair, but thank you for interjecting on my comments. I appreciate that, because what I'm really trying to say is, if one action item is we need a list, that's one thing. If the other is we need a list, and by the way, take a certain action on certain things, it needs to be, I think it needs to be more prescriptive. It'd be my only point.
So I believe the counselor at this point is looking for, and I haven't seen the motion that is being drafted. I believe the counselor is looking for more precise information, in her words, easy wins. And upon receiving that information, we could at some point in the future give direction to staff to go ahead with that. So do we have a motion that we could look at? Counselor, can you articulate pretty succinctly what your motion might be?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A motion of asking staff to provide a list of the current 143 parks that have garbage pickup services in the winter, and a list of easily accommodated parks or trail systems for roadside pickup with low costs and incremental gains for servicing.
We are working on that. Go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and while staff are working on that, I just thought I might ask a question of our staff. Because you'd mentioned different containers and different opportunities that might be available, and of course there's changing technologies out there with sensors on the cans and such. How many, I realize you may not have the answer for this, but since it was part of the discussion, I became curious. How many different modes of garbage collection do we have currently in operation in our parks right now? Like, are we using 2 different methods, 3 different methods, depending on the parks, or is it on a park by park basis?
Through the chair, the methods are very rudimentary. It's pickup trucks with staff that physically lift the 45-gallon drums or a lesser type of container, but it's not an automated system. It's a hand-driven system right now. I do have one other question though. Is it? I appreciate working on the motion. Is it possible to just bring the information back to the council? I don't know if it needs to be a motion and a report. I just wondered if that's an option or not. It's something that we have at our fingertips, and we can get you that information relatively quickly. I just didn't know if it needed to be a report back or not.
Councillor Pelosa.
I think I would prefer to do it formally, just knowing that the multi-year budget is coming up, and we'd have to either just receive it at that point and do nothing, or receive and find a way forward with it that
Could your motion, Councillor, be that staff provide the information at the next council meeting, since staff are prepared to do that? Mr. Stafford, did I misspeak?
That was a little more than we're ready to provide, but we need a little more time than that, just because of the ones that are readily available. We have the list of all the parks certainly at our hands, but the ones to make look at all the other parks and figure out which ones are more readily available would take a little bit of time, for sure.
Would the next CAPS meeting be 2 CAPS meetings, 1 CAP, 2 CAP?
Through the chair, we'll make sure it comes back so that the decision can be made for the multi-year budget. We'll make sure it's in time for that. I would say 2 CAPS meetings, but it'll be in time for that.
So clerks have a draft motion ready that is being posted. If Mr. Stafford, if you could take a peek at the screen as well, and if you think it's too vague or whatever, and Councillor Pelosi, it's your motion. Do you have a seconder, by the way? Councillor Lewis is seconding that motion.
Sir, I was wondering if we could just put more easily serviced. If they were easily serviced, we'd be doing it now. So it's not easily as a bit of a strong word.
Okay, the change has been made. Any other discussion on this motion? So I think what we'll do is an A and a B. A, receive the staff report, and B, the information that Councillor Pelosi is looking for. Mr. Mayor, you're making faces?
I'm smiling.
Okay.
Enjoy.
Okay, I should have said you're making a happy face. So the motion should be up, if you want to look at it. So we have a motion on the floor. Is it, does it meet everybody's satisfaction? And shall we vote, or shall we split it up into an A and a B? It's up to committee. No, we're good? Okay, so I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Perfect. Okay, item 2.6 is the Vimy Ridge Park permanent site, which is wonderful to finally see this report coming back from staff. Councillor Lewis, you asked me to pull this.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this one outside of the other consent items. This is a long-standing and important issue for the Argyle community, for our veterans, and for those who have spent so much time and energy maintaining this park. And colleagues, I want to recognize today Larry Lauer is up in the gallery. He has put in countless hours out there cleaning that park, maintaining it, helping keep the spirit of that site alive. Joyce Larsh is in the gallery as well. She's the chair of the Argyle Community Association, which has formally done an Adopt the Park program for this site, and they organize 2 cleanups a year in the park as well. And then we also have representatives in the gallery, Randy Warden, who is the Zone A District Commander for the Royal Canadian Legion, Renee McKinnon, who's the past chair of the 427 Air Force Association Wing, Barry Sandler, who's the current chair of the 427 Air Force Association Wing. Gus, of course, is also a member at the Air Force Association Wing, and they're here united today. There has been a lot of discussion about which sites are appropriate, how this site, if it goes forward, should look. Every one of these people has been consulted on multiple occasions, and it doesn't stop with them. There's been broad community consultations. Mr. McPherson and Mr. McGonigal hosted the last stakeholders consultation. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was the end of May, out at the East London Public Library. And I'll talk about renaming that the Argyle Library at the Library Board, but I appreciate the time and effort that they came out on an evening and spent with the community hearing about what the vision was for this space. And at the end of the day, the vision for this space is to have a park that's a passive, reflective space where people in the community can walk and sit and reflect on the sacrifices made by those who served in the First World War from our community. It's going to find a good home there next to the Charlie Fox Memorial Overpass. Charlie, of course, was a World War II flying ace and veteran, and Trooper Wilson Place, which commemorates Trooper Mark Wilson, who fell in service to the country in Afghanistan. Sorry, I get a little choked up. The Wilsons are a great family, and I've known them for a long time, and their loss, naming a street after Mark is the least we can do. This is a tribute to our veterans that is meant to be respectful. It's meant to honor their service. It's not meant to be a flashy parade ground. It's not meant to host large community gatherings on a regular basis. It's meant to be a place where people can pause and reflect. And if you drive by there, you'll see people out walking their dogs, people just sitting quietly on the benches, sometimes reading a book, sometimes not. And the space isn't perfect, and that's reflected in the report. We have some things we do need to do. We need an accessible pathway from the sidewalk to the monument. We do need some parking and a curb cut, particularly so that when we do have those remembrances of the anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge or the smaller community Remembrance Day service, because I think it's important for us to reflect on the fact that not everybody can come downtown to the cenotaph. Sometimes those community services are as valuable or even more valuable to those who can't get downtown. So I want to thank everybody who's been involved. And this will not be the only Vimy tribute in the city. Just yesterday, the 427 wing, where there's a living guard of honor planted, has made the decision to call their space on their land Vimy Flight Park. It will be a private park, but it will certainly be something that will be an added attraction to the growing destination that the wing and the area around it with the Jet Aircraft Museum and the Secrets of Radar Museum is becoming. London has a long, proud military history, and rightfully so. And I know that there are people who say, well, there's not enough consultation been done. There's other sites that might matter. Well, we've consulted, and we've consulted, and we've listened, and we've put this off. Today, colleagues, I'm asking you to support this recommendation. Let's move this forward to council. And for Remembrance Day, let's have a Vimy Ridge Park officially declared in this city. It's important to remember the men and women who have served in every conflict under the Canadian Forces. Well, in World War I, it was before we had a Canadian Forces, when we served with the British forces, right up until today, and all the peacekeeping missions, the Korean War, the World War II veterans. These folks, some of them are, well, the World War I veterans are gone. And the World War II veterans are passing into history. So it does fall to our hands to keep the remembrance of what they did alive. So let's just finish with, the appropriate ending to this. We will remember them. We have to remember them lest we forget.
Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. Very briefly, Chair, I would like to acknowledge the veterans and Legion members in our gallery today. Having come from a family where two of my uncles served in the Second World War, as did my father, 2 New Brunswick Rangers and 1 Merchant Navy. And with one uncle that didn't come home. He's buried in Belgium. And I was honored some years ago to be the first family member to pay tribute. So what are we doing here with this? We're paying tribute, and we're showing great honor. I won't repeat all the thoughtful comments Councillor Lewis has said. That's exactly the right things to acknowledge. But I do want to add my support to this and thank our Veterans and Legion members for their thoughtful support, and for all of us as a community to remember them as well.
Anybody else? Councillor Sully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, I just wanted to thank my colleagues for voicing their support for this. In particular, Ward Councillor Sean Lewis. You know, he's been very active on this even before coming to council. So I want to thank him for his efforts on this, and thank all the members of the public for attending, and the veterans and all those involved in upkeep and the countless hours of work to make this an amazing effort to tribute those who are no longer with us. Again, thank you all for your service and all your ongoing efforts.
Committee, any others? So I'll just make a few comments from the chair, if that's all right. So it's a couple of years now that this has been going on, and I will admit, when this particular site first came to this committee a couple of years ago, I wasn't convinced that this was the site to appropriately honor this event. And I count the Wilsons as dear friends, especially Sean as a good friend. And I had discussions with them. I had discussions with commanders at Wolseley Barracks, and a lot of discussions with staff. I'm really pleased to see this how it ended up. I'm pleased to see the community and stakeholder veterans groups, all of the consultation that's taken place. This is everybody coming together for an appropriate ending to this. And I'm glad we didn't rush into anything. And I'm really glad to hear about the adoption of the park, to see the community collaboration continue. So I'm happy to see this, the ending put on this story, and it's not really the ending, it's the ending of this chapter, and it will continue. So, Councillor Lewis, I am assuming that you would love to move this motion, and, well, we got a lineup for seconders, but I'll go with the mayor on that one. And if there are no other comments or questions, then we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So that deals with our consent items. Let's move to scheduled items, and the first one is 3.1, a delegation from Flo Cassar of the Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Oppression Advisory Committee. Oh, your microphone there. Go ahead. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, and good afternoon to the members of the Community and Protective Services Committee. My name is Flo Cassar, and this is my peer, Kash Hussain, and we have the privilege of leading the City of London's annual Diversity, Race Relations, and Inclusivity Award. We are members of the DIAC Committee, and we take great pride in managing the process, if you will, for the annual awards program. The award program is coming up very shortly, and I am just going to pull up my presentation. I thought I saw it just a minute ago. Thank you. So we have a short presentation for you today to tell you a little bit about the award and what our ask is today. So as I mentioned, this is a City of London award that recognizes and promotes public awareness of people in the city who are recognizing and contributing to diversity, race relations, and inclusivity and human rights. That essentially, at the end of the day, helps London advance London as a welcoming community. The award itself recognizes groups and individuals in 5 key categories, and I'm just going to go to the next slide here, which is right here. So as you'll see, there's 5 categories that we recognize groups in. The first 2 is for small business or businesses in labor, and we separate those between those who have members less than 49 or those that have members or employees that are 50 or more. The second grouping is social services and community services, non-for-profit groups. This is typically our highest area where we receive nominations for. And again, those groups are separated between members under 50 or more than 50. And our future, our youth, is another category that we recognize. It could be an individual or young groups or associations that are promoting diversity and inclusion as well. Other conditions or eligibility of the award are outlined before. And number 2 is that they've been operating in London for at least the last 12 months. And similarly, that what they've been doing has been qualifying in London for the past 12 months. And really what that's about is ensuring that there's some sustainability to what their initiative is. And of course, that they consent to the nomination that's being brought forward. For those that are nominating, what we do is we do require them to be a resident or of the City of London, and that they have some familiarity of what the initiative is. We will reach out to, if not the nominator, but to the actual nominee to get a better understanding of that group if we don't know them, and to also help them with their nomination in terms of their submission, so they're feeling good and comfortable with the quality of their submission. What you see before you is a list of winners in the last 5 years. This program is in its 19th year, and we're pretty excited this year happens to be scheduled on International Human Rights Day. This information is also available on the website, and at the end of the presentation, we'll share where that information is available. So some key dates. The nomination program closes on September the 30th. And after that time, the Awards and Recognition Committee gets together. We review all the submissions, do interviews where they're required, and prepare ourselves to make a recommendation to the Diversity and Inclusion Anti-Oppression Committee, or DIAC. And then on November the 5th, it will come back to this table to review our recommendations to Council on the 12th, and then our awards night is on December the 10th. Some background on the awards night. Each one of you will be extended an invitation to participate in the event. It takes place, or gets started, if you will, before the City Council meeting on Tuesday, December the 10th. We are going to ask the Mayor to say a few words. And then as you go into your council meeting, the actual presentation of the awards will be part of that meeting. And we will then debrief with the group, have a bit of a reception and opportunity for those both nominees and winners to do some networking. So what's our ask? Our ask is to create some awareness and assist with promoting the program within your circles of influence. This is a great opportunity when you're out in your communities to talk to people, tell them about the award, and continue to create the awareness and encourage them to either reach out to us or to submit a recommendation. We want to continue to promote all good work that's being done in our city, and certainly this is one way to show it. There is a fact sheet that will be distributed to all council members to provide you with some more information about the program. And here on this last slide is information on where the DREA Award Program information is and who to contact. I would like to thank new council members Pelosa, Hillier, and Kayabunga, who's not here today, for expressing interest in meeting with us one-on-one. Councillor Hillier apologized. Cash was actually welcoming his first grandson at the time of your meeting, so was unable to make it. But thank you so much for your interest and your support for this program.
Thanks very much. Committee, any questions, comments? I think it's wonderful, and I always try to make a point of attending the awards prior to the council meeting every year, so thank you very much for coming, and I guess I will look for a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Pelosi, seconded by Councillor Hillier. And we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Moving right along, we have item 3.2, which is the public participation meeting concerning the adult entertainment parlor location at 2190 Dundas Street. So I will look for a motion to open the PPM, moved by Councillor Pelosi, seconded by Councillor Lewis, and we can vote on that. So we've just opened the PPM, and we will have a staff presentation, and then we will move to members of the public if they have. Okay, good, and we will announce the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Once a city councillor, always a city councillor, I guess. Mr. Kotsipis, go ahead.
I'll be Mr. Katolik today.
It started with a K.
Not a bad person to confuse me with, though.
There is some similarities.
There is.
But go ahead, Mr. Katolik.
Yes, the licensed adult live entertainment parlor located at 21 Dundas Street has been operating as a licensed parlor for many years, if not decades, as a licensed parlor. However, in 2015, they lost their liquor license and closed at that time and have been closed since then. In December of 2016, we received a application by Paris Clubs, Inc. to operate a licensed adult live entertainment parlor at that location. And in late 2017, the license manager refused that application based on inspections by City of London municipal law enforcement officers, fire prevention officers, and the health unit. And that refusal was appealed by the applicant, and this May of 2019, the hearings officer agreed with the position of the license manager, and the license was refused. So given the long-standing vacant location of this parlor, given the fact that there's a new property owner at this location who does not wish to operate or permit the use at that location, and given the decision of the hearings officer, Civic Administration recommends that this location be removed from the business licensing bylaw as a permitted location, and the number of permitted locations be reduced from 4 to 3. I'd be happy to answer any technical questions you may have.
Committee, any technical questions? Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I know there's two parts to this. One is the owner of the properties wish to not have this considered. But the notion of moving this from 4 to 3, presumably, that may I ask through you, Chair, to Mr. Katolik, is that potentially a transferable license? That is to say, were it not at this, or is it premise specific when we provide licenses out there for this purpose?
Mr. Kotsipis, Katolik.
Through the chair, license applications are site-specific. So this has happened before with previous council. There was an application for a a new license on Exeter Road, so they're very site-specific. So if somebody wanted to come forward in the future, they would have to amend the business licensing bylaw to increase the number of licenses and for the specific location. And I could clearly say that there's not a lot of people knocking on our doors for this type of activity in the City of London, which is concurrent with other cities. These types of locations are being reduced across Ontario. Some cities do not have any licensed parlors at this time.
Any other questions? No? Then I will go to members of the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the committee? Ms. Walker, welcome.
Thank you. I have to say, I see this beautiful Robin Amston here. About 18 years ago, the two of us went with a group and did a research study on the sex industry and went into every single strip club and spoke to the women, and it was really an amazing experience. And I haven't seen you, so it's lovely to see you. I always remember that experience. I just always like to acknowledge some of your amazing staff team when I ever come here, and today I just really want to acknowledge Orest Katolik, because I've worked with Orest on these issues for many years, and he's incredibly patient, resilient, and a wealth of information. And he's also very open-minded. And so, Orest, it's lovely to see you as well, and thank you very much. I was really pleased not very long ago when City Council unanimously passed its strategic plan, and in that plan included specifically creating a safe community for women and girls. And Mayor Holder reminded me the other day, it was unanimously passed, and it was one of 5 areas of focus. And actually, it got a lot of attention across the country, where other individuals and agencies have contacted us to try to get information about how they could adopt this as well. One of the specific areas in here states that we will recognize London as a sex trafficking hub and take action to work collaboratively towards solutions. And it is a sex trafficking hub. And just to give you some background, between our 2 programs at the London Abused Women's Centre, we have in 3.5 years provided service to 2,840 at-risk women and girls, including almost 1,000 who identified as being trafficked. And we have also had more than, almost 200 family members fly into London from various parts of Canada because their children, their daughters, were students at Western and were lured into the sex trade, and they're desperately trying to find them. So this is a major issue for us. I think it's incredible to have a community where somebody comes forward and buys a whole building to ensure that women have jobs that are sustainable employment opportunities in the future, and that the community benefits from that. And so I do want to acknowledge Ray O'Connor, because I think what he's done is just absolutely amazing, and we're very grateful for that. Some people forget that prostitution is involved in strip clubs. And in fact, oftentimes prostitution is how women eventually are lured and trafficked across the country. And that either happens by by a sex purchaser who wants a lap dance, by the manager of a club, or by a boyfriend who they meet at the club. And so this is, when we reduce the number of strip clubs, we are also reducing and helping to reduce trafficking. We should also recognize that in our legislation, the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act, sexual services are clearly defined, and they do define that lap dancing, which is a regular occurrence at strip clubs, is illegal. And in fact, sex purchasers could be charged and convicted for that. So I think it's important to remember that illegal activity is going on in these establishments. So I do want to just talk a little bit about the legislation just for 1 second or two, because prostitution is deemed in the legislation to be a dangerous activity, inherently violent, and poses a significant risk to women and girls as far as violence and psychological harm. Prostitution reinforces gender inequalities, and in fact, if we didn't have prostitution, or what I should say is that prostitution is not compatible with women's equality rights. One of the things that people forget is it's called the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act, because there is a risk and danger to communities as well. There is often other illegal activities that are happening around these facilities. Drug dealing, organized crime. We often hear from community members that their children are exposed to sex purchasing, which commodifies women and leaves their daughters to believe that women are just objects, and leaves their sons to believe they have a right to commodify women and girls. And I think it also can present harassment issues and increased noise and loitering and garbage and things like that into communities. So it's really important we recognize that this is an individual issue, but it's also an issue that impacts our communities across the city. And Orst indicated that this is a dying business, and it is. And we are grateful that this is a dying business. And it's a dying business because we are becoming more aware of sexism and misogyny in our communities, and more of us are making an effort to decrease that. And so where in the old days it used to be that, you know, the old guys would get together and the old boys club go down to the strip clubs for their business lunch, you don't see that anymore. It's totally inappropriate. And so we're happy that this is a dying business, and we're happy to see this reduced down by one facility. And so we appreciate the opportunity to come today, and I appreciate very much the work of bylaw enforcement and Mr. Orst, or Mr. Katolik, and also police services. We work as a team in this community, and I'm leaving because I know you're telling me that. Yeah. So, but I just wanted to acknowledge the strength in our community to work cohesively and collaboratively towards solutions. So, thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walker. Anybody else from the gallery would like to comment on this item? I'm not seeing any other commenters, so I'm looking for a motion to close the public participation meeting, moved by Councillor Pelosa and seconded by Councillor Lewis. Oh, and we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Committee, questions, comments? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a lot to say today. It's a very Ward 2 heavy agenda. I can tell you colleagues that the community is very happy to see this recommendation come forward to staff, and I'm going to try not to echo too much what we heard from Megan Walker, but I had the opportunity to sit down this afternoon with our new chief of police and have a conversation about issues in the ward as well as in the community as a whole. And I can tell you, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but if this recommendation goes through, it will be a relief to our police services as well, because this site has been a drain on police resources. And if we were looking at issuing a new license today, we wouldn't even consider this site. I think it would actually not adhere with our current zoning regulations. It's very close to a public school. It's right across the street from residential homes, and it's just not a site that we would even consider as appropriate in this day and age. It only existed as a grandfathering in. Residents had to put up with noise at all hours of the day and night, particularly at night as last call passed and as people came out, and unsavory behavior frankly moved from inside to outside. Kids walking to the nearby Tim Hortons for lunch from the school. had to see activity happening outside this building, which not the kind of activity that you want to be exposing grades 7s and 8s to, frankly. I gotta say, a huge thanks to the O'Connor family first for believing in Argyle and stepping up and taking a new direction for this plaza. If residents have never been there, Lynn's Bakery has the best butter tarts in London, so I encourage you to pop out there and try them. I know that they are hoping that one of the new tenants will be a chocolate boutique, so I'm sure that Councillor Pelosa, I'll be able to persuade her to come out to Ward 2 and visit once the doors open there. But I don't want to make light of the situation either with regard to this establishment, and neighbors don't, people who live in these neighborhoods don't want these kind of establishments in their residential neighborhoods because of the problems that it brings. And I've been on a police ride-along. I've seen the call come across the queue about, you know, being on the lookout for a vehicle because a 14-year-old female was in the vehicle and was suspected to be a victim of human trafficking and sex trafficking. So these are situations that we have to take seriously. We know that there's a whole variety of economic influences that go into what drive people into sex work, and I'm not here to make moral judgments on those situations. That's a whole discussion for another day, and certainly by including it in our strategic plan, I think it's a discussion that will continue on in this community. But I know the ward would really, really welcome council's full support on this. Colleagues, I really encourage you to pass this recommendation, and let's move forward with new opportunities in East London, and at the end of the day, a community that will be happier with the result.
Thank you. Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the words of my colleague. The development of that plaza that can now happen and actually bring value to the community is wonderful to see. It is a great bakery. I am familiar with it, which I don't think my colleagues would find surprising. In the actual motion though before us, I'm glad to see this as we protect and talk about protecting women and girls. I have a daughter, I have sons, and how we raise them matters. Thank you to Ms. Walker for the work you continue to do in the community and raising this issue. It's not the conversation we want to always be having. It's not how we want to paint Londoners and the neighborhoods we live in, but it is what's happening. And anything we could do to stop commodifying women and girls. I'm not a product. I have no interest in being viewed in that light, and certainly having entered some of those spaces myself, that's how they tend to look at each other in that space. You're just, that's your purpose. And that mindset doesn't always stay in that space and does find its way into our community. And protecting our community and exploited people from human trafficking is a major issue before us. Certainly being a South End councillor, I'm aware of what's happening around my hotels. I hear it from residents. I hear it from the women working at the restaurants around the facilities and how they feel unsafe in those areas. So anything we can do to move London towards a safe community to raise our families, retire in, and send our children to school in is appreciated, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? No comments or questions? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Katolik. My apologies for continuing to, I don't know what got into me today. And Ms. Walker, thank you for your submission. I too am really happy to see this come forward. This has also been a long time coming, but sometimes when you follow the process and you do things right, it sometimes takes a long time just to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And I think staff have done that in this case, and I thank you for that. And thank you to councillors for your words. I won't repeat them. They're bang on. And with that, we need a mover, Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Pelosa, and we can vote. Councillor Lewis.
I just want to say I'm happy to move this recommendation presented by Mr. Costas' better-looking brother there.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So we have another PPM. This one is regarding item 3.3, public nuisance bylaw amendments. I need a mover to open the PPM. Councillor Pelosa, seconded by the mayor, and we can vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Go ahead, Mr. Katolik.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This past June, Council directed Civic Administration to come back with an amending bylaw, the public nuisance bylaw, to address cost recovery. This issue has had much public debate in the community on who's going to cover the costs and the bills for addressing nuisance parties and unsanctioned street parties. And based on the principles of taking ownership for your own behavior and your own actions, Civic Administration recommend that we focus on the persons that are creating or contributing to nuisance parties. We are not recommending that landlords be invoiced for the behavior of their tenants. So in summary, when we looked at the entire bylaw, we are recommending that fees be imposed on persons who sponsor, create, continue, conduct, cause, or host nuisance parties. And when we deal with nuisance parties, such as during unsanctioned street parties, we work as a team together with many first responders, but more specifically, fire prevention and London Police. And we are recommending that the nuisance party cost recovery amendment focus on the costs per hour of officers within these three agencies, and it totals up to $180 per hour or cost or part thereof per officer. To summarize, there's no real silver bullet solution to the issue of unsanctioned street parties and nuisance parties. However, many of the actions taken by our agency partners, such as Western University in addressing the student code of conduct, such as Western Student Council at looking at alternative events in that day. This is yet another available tool to enforcement agencies to address this issue. We continue to work with these agencies beyond the three that are up at this on the screen from an operational perspective for unsanctioned street parties. And just to focus on this specific amendment, there's one other municipality in Ontario, that's Guelph, Ontario, that has used this tool successfully during their unsanctioned street parties, although they're a little smaller than ours and smaller than Waterloo's, but they have been successful in speaking with my counterparts in Guelph in focusing on the costs for enforcement during nuisance parties to the actions and behavior of the occupants and the tenants of the premises. I'd be happy to answer any technical questions committee may have before going to a PPM.
Any technical questions, committee? Not seeing any. I'll move to members of the public. If there is anyone in the gallery that would like to speak to this item. I'm not seeing people fighting over the microphones up there. I'm not seeing, so I am looking for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Huber, we had a former city councillor, Mr. Huber, we had a former city councillor speak to the last issue. You're not interested? No? Okay, good. You might speak as long as you, I'm sure you might speak as long as Megan Walker, who actually went over the 5 minutes, knowing you as well as I do. No, okay. Oh, Mr. Mayor.
I'm not sure if it's a point of order, but as much as it's always great to hear former Deputy Mayor Hubert, I don't know that we need to encourage gallery members when we're trying to be thoughtful about it. It feels like we're begging. I think certainly as those who wish certainly can, and anytime they wish to speak, I'm sure they would do that. So I'm
Thank you, Mr.
quite as
Mayor.
happy for us to proceed as you feel appropriate,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
Do I have a mover to close the PPM? Councillor Sally, seconded by Councillor Hillier.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Any comments or questions on this item from committee members? I'm not begging, just asking. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. Only one comment, if I can, and certainly Mr. Kotolog's made some comments that this is a step in a series of steps, all important, because I think all of us are looking for thoughtful restraint as it relates to the Roughdale area issues for the sake of the residents, for the sake of the students, all of them. And I think the code of conduct, as has been referenced, and I salute Western for doing that, the USC's support, and I honor the students for taking a leadership role with this, the nuisance bylaws and other actions that we're taking. Mr. Kotolog, it's all steps, and so more a statement than a question, but I thank you, and I look forward as we get closer to the date that we've taken appropriate and thoughtful steps that will diminish the impacts and the the black mark that that has left in this community. That's certainly the hope. Thank you.
Any other committee members? No? Okay. So I just want to add my thanks, Mr. Katolik, both this one and the previous issue. Megan Walker said it very well. I'm sure there isn't a lot of people out there that realize what you sometimes have to go through to do your job, and you do it very well. And as the mayor said, this is another step in a long-ish process, and community coming together, stakeholders coming together, and everybody working together on this to put this issue to rest as well as we can. Thank you very much. And with that, I think the mayor is moving it, and Councillor Sully is seconding, and so we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So we'll move on to items for direction. 4.1 is London's film and multimedia industry update. So I believe staff are going to speak to this. No? Okay. So the report speaks for itself, but we also have a delegation request?
Yes.
From Kay Peckham of the Forest City Film Festival. Sometimes when we get delegation requests, we take the request and have the delegation at the next meeting, but since this report is on the agenda, it makes sense to hear the delegation today, but it is up to committee. It's moved by Councillor Sully and it's seconded by the mayor. I'm not seeing any comments on that, so we can vote on hearing the delegation right now.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Great. Ms. Peckham, welcome to the committee, and you can push the little button on the microphone and go ahead.
I'm all set. Thank you. So I'm Kelly Peckham, and I am with Wide Eye Television. I grew up in London, but I've spent nearly 30 years working in national television, mostly out of Toronto. I've worked in all the national newsrooms. I've been a producer for W5, and I've spent years working for Discovery Channel around the world. And I can say none of you are as scary as Gail Vaz-Oxlade on Till Death Do Us Part. Okay, now I've also worked at a network level, and that's allowed me to learn about the business of television. 5 years ago, I came home to London, and I'll never look back. Now, to give back, I work on the board of the Forest City Film Festival, which is an event that celebrates our regional talent and helps to boost emerging filmmakers. Now, here are a few key facts. In Ontario in 2017, production jumped 23% in a single year. The industry was responsible for nearly 38,000 good-paying jobs, and entry level is about $30 an hour, even if you're sitting and watching trailers in a parking lot. In Cambridge, our neighbor to the east, in 2017, their film office brought $330,000 into the local economy. Last year, 1 year later, the economic impact was roughly $2.28 million. This year could exceed that. Now, why? It's because Toronto is busting at the seams. Locations are being used and reused, and they're getting tired. Studios are unavailable. In fact, my contact on Ontario Creates told me that we're running at about 0% for studio space in Toronto. Most studios are booked out for at least 2 years. Now, some locations like airports and courts are unavailable in the city of Toronto. Now, the film and television industry also gets 10% in tax credits. That's 10% of their labor over and above what the province gives them in the city of Toronto. Now, why do they do that? Why do they give these incentives to a multi-billion-dollar industry? It's because for every dollar the province of Ontario invests in the industry, they get a $1.20 return. Film and television is big business. And like the real estate market, it's moving down the highway from Toronto, and that is happening now. Now, for the past year, many film and television professionals like me who've moved back to London have been pushing very hard to bring this industry home. It would support so many of the city's businesses: caterers, transportation companies, hotels, restaurants, antique shops. Transportation is a big one, but locations, locations, locations. Last year, Hamilton saw a $60 million spin-off from 811 permits. That's up 50% from the previous year. Equally important is that this would employ the talent being specifically trained at Western, Fanshawe, and Ouyart, which is one of the premier sound schools in the country, right here in London, Ontario. Currently, all that talent is draining away, forced to move to Toronto, Hamilton, and Sudbury to make a living. Now, this multi-million-dollar industry is already investigating London as a stop. The investment required by the city itself is minimal. Essentially, you need to streamline your permitting and invest in one thing, and that's a film commissioner. This person in any city is the liaison between the city and the film community. They're the knowledgeable greeter and ambassador when production companies come calling, and they go out to industry events and production houses to meet decision makers and pitch this city as the place to do their filming. Private industry would do the rest. I've personally met with some private companies in London and Toronto who've expressed significant interest in building studio space in London. With this position of the film commissioner and new permitting processes in place, the welcome mat will be open. It's a relatively small investment for a huge potential ROI. Now, I've read the proposal put forward by this committee. The city has done a really great job and has provided some excellent insights. I think the first step is a strong one, and everyone on this has done their due diligence. But after consulting with several colleagues, my input would be this. Yes, let's see the groundwork in place to make the industry able to function through city processes. things like permitting and renting police out for security. But this should not take a year to accomplish. We believe that this timeline has to be accelerated. Any next steps should be carried out by a reputable consultant, someone with experience in creating these processes within the industry. And we also believe that the committee should look into inviting some of the several local television and film professionals who are already here and excited about this prospect to help you with the process. It's a very, very complicated industry, and having the expertise here in the city to draw on would be very, very helpful. Finally, no film and TV companies will really significantly come calling until a film commissioner is in place. This is the only real dollar investment for the second phase of this program. And it's the only way that it can be done. This too, we believe, should be accelerated within the current proposed timeline. If this person is working to get locations in place while permitting is being sorted out, then less time would be lost. If London isn't the next stop on the industry's move down the highway, quite frankly, we're missing out. If we don't do it, another community will. Our talent will go elsewhere, along with the jobs, the economic benefits, and the incredible profile that this would bring to London. It would also, down the road, very much help our tourism. And time is of the essence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sully.
Thank you, and thank you for coming, and I see also Norman is here as well, and we got his letter, so thank you for attending. I did have a question, kind of what are we expecting as far as the budget, kind of, and how long it would take to attract a film commissioner, because I know sometimes that could take a while, so I don't know if that question is to you or to staff, but I'll go through the chair.
I see staff anxious to, well, sort of anxious to comment. Go ahead.
Through the chair, yes, we'd have to investigate that at what the financial costs would be. We've anticipated in this report a $60,000 to $70,000 item, but what we're looking for at this point in time wouldn't be actually named as the film commissioner. It's working for to get to that point. So, and to address a couple other comments from Ms. Peckham, and we thank you for that presentation. We agree. We don't think a year is the number either. 2019 review, we're already close to September, so we believe in the next 3 months. So it's not a full year to do that. It just happens to be 2019. So by the end of this year, so we believe in 3 months we can clean up the work in step one. And then number two for us, and the funding that we talked about, was not a film commissioner at this point, a person, a consultant, somebody. To look at exactly what this job would entail and how it would entail and what the film commissioner would do, and work with the groups like Ms. Peckham to figure out what that is and what it would entail, and then move forward if we believe that that's the time to move forward with the film commissioner. So we just believe we had some more homework to do to get to that point.
Thank you, and I guess my question is, I know Councillor Van Holst brought this up maybe a year or two ago, this discussion, and I want to know if someone can remind me where his motion kind of went. So I don't know if I can ask him to the chair or to staff. Oh, sorry, this is your motion? That's now the report, or through the staff?
Go ahead, Mr. Stafford, or not.
So through the chair, this is directly responding to the council resolutions from 2017, May 29th, 2017.
Thank you, and that was my thing, so I can appreciate the timelines, and there has been patience in the industries. We were talking about this in 2017. Councilor Van Holst has been doing more and more work on this. I can appreciate that we don't want to move, or we can't move as fast, but I am more inclined to want to hit the ground running and really just kind of take those next steps and those bold steps. So I might be prepared for a motion shortly, but I'll kind of see what the comments are. But I guess my last question to staff is, what could we do from council to help accelerate the end game, whether it be more resources to achieve what the industry is asking for? Because I see the merit and I see the benefit, and I think I was supportive of Councilor Van Holst when he brought this up 2 years ago, and I think now it's the time for us to act.
Through the chair, we see the benefit as well, and we appreciate Ms. Peckham's urgency, and I think we feel the urgency too. The one caution that we've been told is to make sure you're ready to do this right. Don't do it wrong. don't bring the industry here until you're ready to do it right. And we agree it doesn't have to be a year for that to happen, but we do believe we need a couple more months to kind of get our ducks in order and figure out what our actual needs are, and we can report back at that time or bring the business case forward at that time, but we just believe we need some more time to clean up our processes here, as well as figure out exactly what this film commissioner will do, so.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Councillor Saleh, if you want to speed up the end game, pass me an infinity gauntlet, please. Through you to our guest, though, Ms. Peckham, I wondered if, from your wealth of experience with regard to a film commissioner position, in other communities, just in broad terms, would you see this as a position that's operating, you know, from City Hall under the auspices of a city department? Do you see this as more of a fit for one of our arm's length agencies like Tourism London, or perhaps our Economic Development Corporation? In general terms, with your experience, where would you see this role fitting in?
I've been speaking to a lot of people about that, and I think you have to be, our industry is seen as, it's a tourism draw, it's, you know, it's seen as a lot of different things, but essentially what it is it's a business. It's a very complicated business that you're bringing in. So I think you need to look at this as some kind of economic development, because it is going to support so many of the industries in the city. And I think that I would see it, with all due respect, I think arm's length is actually a very good way to go with this, because when things happen, they have to work very closely with all of the city officials on permitting, on permissions, on being disruptive, on having police security. All of those things have to come from the city. However, as an economic development, there are a lot of private interests involved. There's a lot of private money that will be brought to the city, and I see that as an economic development.
So just, colleagues, I'm just going to share a comment then. I really appreciate that, that insight. And that was kind of the way I felt we should be going, but I wanted to ask that question of you. Colleagues, I'm mindful of something the mayor commented on when only a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about gateway casinos. And through you, Chair, if we don't take the opportunity when it's there, then the opportunity will go elsewhere and we will miss out. And the potential economic benefit, the potential job creation that we could see out of pursuing this is something that as a community we need to take advantage of, and we need to take advantage of soon, because we have a jobs crisis in the city. There's no two ways about it, and it's been said in the media many, many times. So I would certainly be interested to see what Councillor Saleh may suggest in terms of a more aggressive timeline. I am also cognizant of the fact that when we do it, we want to do it right. So let's make sure we cross our T's and dot our I's, but the sooner we can get this done and hopefully attract some investment in the community, the better.
Councillor Van Hulst, and then the mayor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So it's great to see the excitement for this item. It has taken quite a while, but I believe that the work that's going on now is good. And I think in a few months that we'll be in a much better position. So I'm happy with that. I appreciate Kelly Peckham coming to present. That was great information. And the point that I would stress is that our talent is going elsewhere, and they're my friends. Caitlin Murphy, Rachel Jones, Nikki Kameni, Jason McDonald, Tyler Parr, all people that tremendous talents that have had to go other places to take advantage of the opportunities. So it'd be great when we have those here. I'm going to just ask a couple questions through you to staff and then perhaps make a couple more comments. But with respect to the permitting, well, let me ask two questions. What were our permitting costs compared to some of the other cities that might have gotten more films? And can you let us know what kinds of inquiries we've gotten recently for films, and what kind of interest are we generating here in London?
So through the chair, as it relates to fees, the City of London fee for a commercial activity is about $685 a day. In other municipalities, that has been lowered within the years to under $100. So what I would say is that as we have already worked on user fees for our submissions for the multi-year budget process, you will see a large decrease in variance and permitting fees being proposed for council's consideration as part of the budget process. As it relates to the inquiries that have come, on average in the City of London, now it's important to note that historically the City of London mandate related to film has been to permit requests on public property. That has been the extent of our participation with the film sector. We usually average about 6 to 8 permits annually from a commercial perspective. I would say since May or April of 2019, as you'll see in the report, we worked very hard to update the locations database on Ontario Creates. Since that time, we have probably had about 9 to 12 requests just since May or April. It's a bit of an indication that shows you that keeping the locations database up to date is impactful. And so I believe that answers the questions.
Yes, thank you. So I think it's really exciting for us to think about London as a potential hub for this industry because we've got so many of the elements here. And as of course, Councillor Lewis pointed out, the jobs potential is great. These are different jobs than we have, and jobs that people will find very fulfilling. So that's exciting. Canada holds the prestigious position of being second in the world in terms of number of films made and the competency of our crews. And because of our great diversity, you can imagine we could be creating films and content for almost every nation on Earth. So I'd like us to have a piece of that. So I'm pleased that we're going to come back with the business case. And in the meantime, we'll be doing some of those tweaks to our permitting. And I think when that returns, we'll be able to make a pretty good decision and move things forward. I'm thrilled that we've got some impetus in this committee to move things forward quickly, because that's where we need to go. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've had the opportunity to meet with staff, Mr. McGonigal, Mr. Stafford, and Ms. Peckham, among others, Mr. Kaplan, and we've had some pretty good dialogue around a number of issues. It keeps coming back to me more a question of not if now, but when. And so to the extent that Councillor Van Holst may have been ahead of his time on this, maybe ahead of us, certainly in this process. Bravo for that. It seems to me there's two parts to this that I think we're all wrestling with. One is process, and the other is I'll call it the tip of the spear. And process from the standpoint, as I think Mr. McGonigal's pointed out, is to do with things like permits costing, permits timing. I noted that there were 9 to 12 permits you mentioned since April requests. How many did we get? Can I ask you that, if I might, through you to staff?
Through the chair, I would most certainly say that 4 or 5 are moving forward. I don't know what a regular metric or rate is on inquiries against actuality in this sector. But I would say 5 for sure, with a couple more in the hopper as we speak.
Thank you. And again, through you, Chair, I think that's where people with the expertise or background of Ms. Peckham, I mean, would you, if I could ask you that, if you had 12, if I could, through you, Chair, ask Ms. Peckham, if you had 12 inquiries, knowing that they're ongoing, and who knows what ongoing means, it just means they're in process, but what would be a reasonable close rate, if reasonable is even the right word, just to help give us a bit of a feel for this, please?
Honestly, I don't know what the close rate would be. All I know is that when a location is looked at, for London to be a location, we have to have locations. So let's say, envision that you're doing the new, a new movie that is the sequel to something you've already seen. You need not just your streets, you need a business, you need a house, you need a cornfield, you need a donut shop, right? All of those things will bring the big budget things to us if we have those locations more fleshed out. But in the meantime, we have a lot of emerging filmmakers, like the people that we're celebrating in the Forest City Film Festival, who may be a lot of these permits that are coming to us now, who are saying, I have to do my film somewhere. Okay, it's not a $28 million film, it's a $100,000 film. But I want to do it in my hometown because I want to celebrate my art here. So that may be some of what we're seeing come along, and having a few of those locations available will make that work. Now, in meeting with a major film company that has come recently to meet with some city staff and some interested community people, they are telling us, and I agree with them, and Ontario Creates is saying as well, that the number of locations we have outlined is 1/50th of what we need. We need to have many more locations outlined and available, because when they come to us, they need to see those before they ask for that permit. And I think that's what's preventing those numbers from going up. I think because if things are affordable here, if things are accessible here, if we have all of the services available to the industry to come in, the caterers, clearly we need to bring equipment to London, which is now not available. But William F. White has already addressed that and said that if we start to get more productions here, they're happy to set up shop here. So the interest is there and everybody is pushing in our direction. It's just a matter of having those processes and that ambassador to make that happen.
So Chair, through this, it seems to me there's three process points here. Number one, is this a business that we as a community want to be in? We're in it a bit, but is this a commitment we want to make? I think that's question number one that we need to resolve as a committee and ultimately as council and ultimately with the support of staff. Second, assuming that is true, or the answer to that would be yes, then the second is what's the process to do that? And this is where I've heard Mr. Stafford say that a couple of months for us to get some things associated with permitting and putting together some of the questions that need to be addressed as we go through this decision-making process, which then leads to the third part, and this is where Ms. Peckham and others of her background may be well appropriate, and that is what, again, I call the tip of the spear, because I'm not sure which comes first. Certainly the decision to proceed, or at least to see if we have enough information to proceed. But do we then put someone in place as that, I think you called that a film commissioner, Ms. Peckham, to get us started to a point where that person leads and gives us the information that we need to help us rationalize whether this makes sense. So it's a bit of the chicken egg, and in terms of which part comes first, and maybe part of the answer is if we are at the point where we say this is a business that we can't afford not to be in, which is a direction I'm certainly leaning, is then what's the right process? And I think we're hearing about timing, which I know we would all respect, and then the third, the urgency is part of that. The urgency associated with moving this along, and that might well, as the tip of the spear point, give us some of the information they need to proceed. So I'll look to some of the thoughts around council for that, but probably no further comment unless I might just ask Ms. Peckham, do you think with that, it's not intended to be a self-serving question, but is that logical? Like, would you, as we're doing a review process, would you think that having someone in that commissioner role makes some sense? Or can it afford to wait for the thoughtful, that really is the question, isn't it? Do we wait for some of the thoughtful considerations over the next couple of months so we can get some of the fundamentals down? Just appreciate actually your thoughts and then perhaps staff's as well. And I'm done with that, thanks.
I think a film commissioner position is a relatively small investment for someone who can actually do a lot of the liaising that needs to be done in advance, go out, and some of the things that they've already done with the council here, with the committee that's been working on this, but really firmly take into hand what has to happen in this city to pave the way, but start making those conversations happen. Production is working down the road, right? So if we're not jumping onto that edge, we may be losing that edge for a foreseeable period of time. By creating that position, which would be a relatively small investment to work in hand with these processes to start banging the gong in Toronto. I've been doing that myself, just independently through my own personal contacts, and people are surprised. They don't even think about us. They don't even know about us. A colleague of mine does all the comedy specials, Anton Leo, out of Toronto, and I said to his wife, who does all his management, why don't you come to London? Come to Budweiser Gardens. I bet you it'll cost you a whole lot less than some of your big venues in Toronto. And she said, oh my God, I never even thought about that before. Those are the conversations that need to start being had. And if it's 3 months, I think 3 months is a great time to get all those processes in order, but the sooner those other conversations are happening, for the sake of the investment that it would be, I think it's time to jump on things as quickly as possible.
Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, thank you for your comments, Ms. Peckham. Don't disagree. I think we're on the same page here, just trying, I think we're in a little bit different place as far as some timelines and maybe what the, I think I have some trepidation in jumping into the title of a film commissioner or film officer or a film office. Part of that is working with the industry a little bit more and hearing the comments from Ms. Peckham tonight as to where and when and what are they doing. And I think the question from Councillor Lewis came up tonight is, who do they work for? So I think in announcing a film officer tonight, I think we haven't quite got to the situation yet as to whether the person works for, and I'll throw out a few examples of Arts Council, Tourism London's, which is part of my portfolio, the Culture Office, Economic Development Corporation, or a private entity. And I think that's some of the struggle that I have right now with the information that I've been able to glean to this point. And I just feel comfortable having a little bit more time to, whether it be the consultant of some sort or engaging the community a little bit more. And I caution using the word consult with the community a little bit more. The film community has been consulted a lot over the last couple of years over this, so I think we need to be specific in our consultation process with that, or our engagement process, just to see where we're at, so that we can bring a recommendation forth in the multi-year budget business case to say we believe that a film officer, a consultant, a film commissioner, and where we believe as a recommendation that this should report to. That doesn't mean that it's right, but I think that's what we should be bringing to you as to what our recommendation is to where and what that should be. Certainly, if council wants to proceed in a different direction, that's certainly okay, and we'll figure it out from there.
Councillor Van Hulst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it looks to me like one possible avenue we can go with to speed things up is the idea presented by Ms. Peckham of the location scout. So I know people who do this. I'm sure you do. Having those extra 50 times locations out there would be great. This is a perfect time for someone to be snapping pictures and finding places in London, because it's summer. If we wait 3 months and then try to put those together in winter, it's not going to be as good. Mind you, it is important to have shots from all seasons, but I think that's a place, and probably a relatively small investment that we could do soon in order to move us forward. And perhaps I could ask through you to our guest, could you estimate what a cost of that might be, just off the top of your head, for our committee's consideration?
Ms. Peckham.
What's interesting is there is a private interest that's actually approached Rob Carver, who's here tonight, about getting some students involved in that process. And I don't know if it would be up to Rob to tell us if he thinks that's enough for now. But the other thing is, if this council feels like it's moving forward in this initiative, Ontario Creates actually not only could you do all of the public lands and the university and the city properties, but Ontario Creates also has kind of a package that they can submit to private individuals to put their house onto Ontario Creates or put their property, their business onto Ontario Creates with clear guidelines on how to photograph that. And that is, I mean, you can make between $100,000 and $3,000 a day by having your house used in the movies. So that's something that may be of interest to the citizens of London. So some of that could happen just through a little bit of promotion and advertising. And I would imagine it wouldn't be overly expensive to employ interns and photography students and offer, jobs to individuals to get involved in this that don't have to be high-end photographers, just people with an interest in this who have some skills with a camera and know how to follow the rules.
Yes, thank you. And I was told at one point, having a professional package put together might be $20,000. Maybe that's a figure council or committee could consider just having available for that process, and then staff could move forward in that way simultaneously.
Councillor Sully?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to get us to a point of decision today, I think based on some of the feedback I heard from my colleagues and from Ms. Beckham and from staff, I think I'm comfortable with moving A, to received information, B, Civic Administration be directed to submit the business case as part of the multi-year budget process to support the completion of the film and multimedia strategy as outlined in phase 2 of this report. Now, I'm not sure if I need a C or if the B will achieve what Mr. Stafford was suggesting, which is to come back with whether we decide to do a recommendation on the film office or a consultant, or, I just want to check, or do you need a C?
We will bring back as part of the business case a recommendation as to what we believe there. It may be a film officer, it may be a consultant, it may be an ability to do both based on the business case. So we will review where we are, but right now we're leaning towards a consultant at this point, but certainly with listening to the discussion this evening, I think bringing back an option for both would be something that we would bring forward.
Thank you, and again, through you, Madam Chair, I think Councilor Renholz did mention something that was important, I think, but I just want to confirm, I think if that opportunity presents himself, is that something staff could do already within existing budgets without really having to come to council? I feel like if it's under 20,000, I don't think you really necessarily need us to give you a clear direction if there's an opportunity for this, so I just wanted to check.
We will look at that opportunity. I think it's too early to ask for a dollar figure at this point. I think we're already looking at locations, but we can look at that opportunity and see what unfolds.
Perfect, and I guess just I guess to the chair, if it's okay, based on the motion that you heard from me today, the A and B, and it's also in the staff report, is that something where the industry is essentially comfortable with at this stage, noting that 2019 is a target, and I guess maybe I'll add that in the motion that 2019 be the target for the report to come back. So just look to Ms. Beckham, to the chair.
I find that very exciting.
I'll second.
So I'll move all of that.
Wonderful. So Councillor Sully is in essence moving the staff recommendation, and the mayor is seconding that. Any other any other comments or questions? Committee or visiting council members? Yes, Councillor Van Hulst.
Just one last point I'll make through you to the people at home. If you're around London and you see a great location, do what I do. I've got my phone, and every once in a while I'll see, oh, this would be a perfect spot, a very cool thing. Look at that, bring it to our attention. We'll be thrilled to know about that. It's also, another important thing is how many places London could look like. And so if you see a place that, hey, this looks like something I've seen in the movies, then it's probably going to be a worthwhile location for us as well. I want to thank the committee for considering this item. I'm thrilled with the work staff has done most recently, and it'd be great to see this move forward. And thanks to our guest.
Thank you, Ms. Peckham. Mr. Stafford, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, I just want to thank the people that have worked on this too. It's a wide group, and it's an interesting group, and they've worked long and hard to get it to this point. So it's a lot of work. I know it seems like it's taken some time, but it's a lot of work to get the research done to get to this place. And I just want to thank everyone that's here today to help move this forward. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so it's moved and seconded. You have another comment, Councillor?
Just quickly, I just wanted to thank Mr. Stafford for all this work. And I hope my comments didn't seem as if the staff wasn't working really hard and fast on this. I know they were. And I know because he's really good at doing things really fast, as example with the Raptors, the Jurassic Park, so.
Wonderful, thank you. So, wonderful. Thanks for all your hard work. And we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. We can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So we will move on to item 4.2, which is a councillor's submission to this committee. And I'll look to committee. Oops, sorry, turn my own button off to see if there are any comments or questions about this item.
I'm happy to hear from Councillor Van Holst.
I was waiting for him to put his hand up.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I brought this item forward because, of course, we know that housing is a big concern. And there are new models that community members have talked to me about in terms of seniors housing. And I know that the Argyle Seniors Housing Task Force has also just recently brought some others to my attention. And now that we've got a housing development corporation, we as a city can take action to move some of these things forward. And they may be things that might not otherwise be done. So what I'm asking for is that as our staff do some public engagement on new models for senior housing. And when I spoke to a staff in the HDC, after suggesting this motion, they said they could accommodate that fairly easily. So perhaps I could go through you to staff just to confirm that.
Through the chair, thank you very much. Definitely, we have gone through a process over the last number of months for the development of the update to our homeless prevention and housing plan to get advice from our community about what kind of housing options they would like to see. I am sure that some of the information that we've received through that process, and I don't have it in front of me and hasn't been collated yet, would give us a sense about that, but we're happy to look at that information and then explore additional options to get some feedback and bring it back to council.
Thank you. So, that would be a great question. So I'll ask now, do we actually need a motion to do this, or can we just leave staff to follow up with this public engagement?
Through the chair, it's your call, but I'm happy to bring back the information without a motion.
Okay, Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to do a motion to receive the councillor's newsletter, sorry, that's what I've been working on for my ward. But a motion to receive the councillor's newsletter and ask.
Letter?
Sorry. Yeah. The piece of literature in front of us that the committee receives it and staff follow up with Councillor Van Holst directly in regards to the report, recognizing that shortly a comprehensive report's going to be coming back about all the housing in the city, what it needs, and certainly seniors are a key component to that, and just making sure that we have all the information in front of us as there are different pieces to the puzzle to give clear direction going forward to make sure that no one's left out in the cold.
Ms. Daters-Beer, is that?
Sorry, through the chair, we're just collaborating here on sharing of information, very timely information, so thank you for the Deputy City Manager. Yes, we can certainly do that, for sure.
So, do you have a seconder? Can you just repeat your motion, Councillor?
It's a motion to receive.
And seconded by Councillor Lewis. Oh, sorry, I was looking at Councillor Hillier. It's my theme for the day.
It has been a theme, so.
It has been. So with that, I'm looking for any other comments or questions. Not seeing any. We can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So the next item is the deferred matters list. And first of all, I'm assuming that item 1 will be removed from the deferred matters list. So just preemptively before Councillor Lewis says anything. Okay. So are there any comments or questions from committee members? Councillor Lewis?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. You already preempted my, can we strike item 1? So I'm prepared to move this.
Councillor Pelosi.
Madam Chair, I believe number 13 and 14 could also be removed as we took care of those today. And in doing so, I'd be happy to second.
Great. So there are a number of items, including number 5, that we dealt with today. So there will be a cleanup of the deferred matters list. So we'll just receive this one, and at the next meeting, we'll see a very different deferred matters list. With that, are you seconding it, Councillor Pelosi? I am. Okay. Then we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Final motion, unless there is additional business, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. I saw your hand go up, Councillor Lewis, so you go first. Councillor Sully is seconding that motion. And we can vote manually. All in favor? Any opposed? None. That motion carries. Thanks, everybody. See you at council next week. That is council.